The subject of questioning economics has been with us for quite some time. One person who unfortunately is missing at this meeting is our good friend Orio Giarini from Trieste, who actually started working on these subjects some good 30, 40 years ago, almost when he was in kindergarten, you know. So this shows our deep interest in the economic issue. And then I remember when Gary and I became members of the Board of Trustees in 2005, Gary really inspired me by teaching me that actually the virtual world is considerably bigger than the real world, and the number is, of course, that the virtual money moving around the world is about almost 10 times bigger than the real money expressed, let's say, in terms of GDP per capita and so on. Of course, in a way, it's totally inappropriate for me to welcome you to this meeting in terms of economy because, as you all know, I'm not an economist. I know nothing about the economy. The only reason how can I be justified in saying are actually two things. One, when I speak about this subject, I always like to quote a good joke which I learned from Poland when Poland was a communist country, and I will tell you a joke immediately. The joke is that a capitalist comes to Poland and asks his colleague there, a Polish economist, what he thinks about capitalism, and of course a good reply is capitalism is on the verge of the collapse. And then he asks him, how about socialism? Socialism is always a step ahead. And we of course do know the story, and both systems of course are really in collapsing, which of course whoever looks at the map of any indicators, no matter how good they are, they immediately see that we tremendously have changed. We do live in a really paradigmatically different world. And there is actually where my other role comes. As a physicist, of course, I am one of those privileged who have undergone the paradigmatic changes in at the turn of the 19th into 20th century. Though many things remain the same, one thing drastically changed. The worldview is really different, and therefore it is really appropriate to call this a paradigmatic change, because it truly is. We still have the concept of time, but the time as we see it nowadays is definitely not the time as Kant or Newton or Aristotle saw it. The same thing is with space, the same thing with us, and this is all getting now very, very relevant for the things in economics and in politics. So in a way, that was an inspiration of something which Gary even knows not only the day, but even the hours, when there was an email coming to him, to Orio and a few other, called The Crazy Idea. And the crazy idea was essentially the beginning of some of these activities, challenging some of the fundamental things and asking the question, do we need in economics what we have undergone in physics? That was in 2010, in January, and then in September of 2010, we started a journal, and I believe most of you did see our journal, Cadmus. It started actually because that was the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the World Academy. We didn't know what to do, and so an idea came, why don't we initiate a journal? When we initiated, we really did not have much of the idea how to do it, but then it was Orio, and then particularly Gary, who really developed it in a proper way as it is now, and I think it's really a very good journal. And there we regularly are publishing it, according to the schedule. So I think by now we have several hundred articles, and good 100 articles and over are those coming in the field of economics. Then we started organizing a number of conferences. Some of them are more general, but then we have a series of conferences focused on what we call the new economic theory. And the first one was in Brasilia, the next one was in Gainesville, then the next one was in Lisbon. This one could be called also in this sequence, but then the more important one will be in Cape Town in South Africa. So it's going on. And of course, there were conferences in Baku, in Astana, and previously in Delhi, and particularly in Geneva, when we launch what we are calling a new paradigm. And so what we have now is two very important things. First, we have a group of about 50 persons, mostly from the World Academy, but from other domains as well, concentrating on developing a new, paradigmatically new economic theory. And then, of course, it is very important to say that we are not alone, and I will conclude by that, that we are not alone. And not only that we are not alone, but we have a very significant two allies. One very significant ally is Pope Francis. I'm not using his full titles, Pontifex Maximum and so on, because he really prefers to be called just simply Pope Francis. And you have seen his encyclica and his previous document a year earlier, where he clearly says this economy that we have is a wrong economy. This economy kills. We have to change this economy. So he is quite definite on that. He also, Alberto is our link with the Vatican, so all the knowledge about Vatican, he is my inspiration there. So he sent me his recent homily in the Vatican, where he really castigated any attempt to go toward the war and so on, and he always links this with the economy, so it's not independent of one of the other. So, okay, he is one of the allies. The other ally, believe it or not, is actually the United Nations. The United Nations did something which is really unbelievable. Never people in power, and of course those who sit at the General Assembly are by definition people in power. They represent head of states. They came up with the document, unanimously signed by all of them, very quickly, which calls Transform Our World. Now, this is when you read the Gattopardo, you see that famous link to this. If you want to continue, you better change, because if you don't change, then this is the end. And with this call, let me wish you a good and very successful meeting. I'm sure you will have it. And the very important thing which we always emphasize, or at least I always emphasize, is to have a good, pleasurable, and inspiring time. Thank you very much.